Meredith, would you please introduce yourself and tell the students what we're here for and what we're going to talk about?
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about nature-based tourism and land management. And so my name is Meredith Devendorf Belford. Recently traded in my last name after a long time. I should take off my hat. See all this gray here? Since we're in pandemic mode, I have not been dipped or clipped in 4 months, and to see how bad it gets. But
I have that problem too. I have plenty of gray.
Yes, my father had shock white hair, and I totally inherited that. So anyway, so you are actually here at my family's home. My family has called this home since 1755. And we were part of a little splinter group of Puritans from England who wound up going through Massachusetts, South Carolina, and ended up here near Midway. And we have been here ever since. And in 1969, my grandparents died. My mother inherited the property. And at the time, my folks lived in San Francisco. My mother was a professional artist, and my father was in television, and I was born in 1970. So now I've just dated myself, turning 50 this year. And at the age of 2, I like to say that I was precocious and said, had enough of California, let's head back to the swamp. But we moved here in 1972. And I grew up here, went off to college. My first stint in graduate school, which was, I have a master's degree in Southern Studies and Cultural Anthropology from Ole Miss. Went to school in New England before that for history and English. But I cut my teeth on forestry. So in the 40s, my family shifted from row crop agriculture to timber. And most of the old fields were cultivated in pine. And so we have been doing sustainable forestry since 1940. And this is what I grew up learning. So I have an interest in history and in anthropology and how people interact with the landscape. And so this all comes back to my being here. I moved home from Mississippi in 1993 when I was 22. And I was going to be home for 6 months to help with a little museum that we had helped start. And it is quite a bit later than that now. I guess we're on year 27 now. And I'm still here. But the part of what I do is manage the silvicultural operations. We have about 8,000 acres in silvicultural cultivation, and then another 1,400 acres roughly of marsh and wetlands that we can't do for any sort of silvicultural operation. So it's about 9,400 acres altogether.
So it's these properties that are out here that you're talking about, the marshland.
This is, yes, so the core property is what you're looking out across right now is you're looking towards Ossabaw Island, which you may or may not be able to see. It's the farthest point of land out. So we're, as crow flies, we're about 10 miles from the ocean. We're on a tidal creek, and the marsh itself, this marsh is roughly 1,000 acres. It was dedicated as a natural heritage area back in 1966 by my grandfather. Back before the Marshlands Protection Act went into effect, because at the time the state was strip mining for phosphates, and he thought that was wrong because he had grown up here as one of 10 kids plowing at the age of 5, and he knew that the marsh was the source of health and survival. And he was a kind of baby ecologist, and he made his fortune in shipping, and then started buying all the property that he could. First he bought out the cotton lien that was on our family land that had been in the family since England gave it to us in 1755, 500 acres of upland. And he bought out a cotton lien that his father had on it in 1925, and then he just started buying property as it became available. So my mother acquired about 1,500 acres of the total acreage in her lifetime, and the rest was acquired by my grandfather. But we've always been rooted in the land, and we all have a love of the land, and that's what we wanted to share with other people. So silviculture obviously is our main stock and trade, but we knew in about 1997 we were concerned because people were not connecting with the land anymore, and there were children who lived maybe 20 minutes from here who had never set foot in the forest. They didn't grow up hunting and fishing or even walking in the woods, and we thought people needed to be physically connected with land in order to be emotionally invested in it. And also environmental education is kind of like, well, they're having fun, they're learning something accidentally. So we opened 2,200 acres to the public. It was a former rice and cotton plantation that's part of our overall holdings, known as Melon Bluff Plantation. So this is the brand. We opened Melon Bluff Nature and Heritage Reserve to the public for passive recreation, hiking, biking, bird watching, horseback riding in 1997. And then my mother said, I have an idea. And those really are pretty much the four most frightening words around here, because it's never like, let's have pizza for dinner. No, let's take the horse barn and convert it into a bed and breakfast. And so we converted it into a 9-room bed and breakfast, and it's known as Palmyra Barn. We opened to our first guests in December of 1998, and this is all, so environmental education, land management, tourism, hospitality, it's all mashed together. And what it all comes down to is it's the holistic use of land. And so we want to be good stewards of it. We want to use our resources wisely. And those resources can be intellectual resources, they can be capital resources, they can be resources of land, things that we take for granted as natural resources, water, trees, air, whatever. Soil, that's one we take really for granted, we forget we have it. And how do these things all work together so that we can sustainably make a living, help support the land in its semi-natural state, provide jobs, and also impart some kind of love and foster a sense of stewardship in people who don't actually own it. Yeah. And the only way you can do that is through experiential learning, which now we're doing through a camera because you can't all be here. Right. Don't you want to be here?
Yes.
Cocktails are after this for those of you who are over 21.
Well, neither you or your mother are trained foresters, and from what I understand and know you really don't have training in hospitality per se. What kind of skills would you say for students, if they want to get into this type of work, what do they need to do? What can they do at this stage in their young professional career to help them move forward into this?
I'll tell you, in tourism, so just backing up a little bit. Sure. to training. So my grandfather had an 8th grade education, and in his lifetime he was head of shipping companies and everything else, and he always believed that you don't stop learning. So curiosity is at the root of everything. And if you find something that you're interested in, my mother always referred to it as like following animal paths. So like you're walking in the woods and you're like, ooh, look at this animal path, and I'm gonna follow it. And sometimes you get to a place where only the animal can get through and you're like, well, that's not gonna work for me. But the curiosity led you on some voyage of discovery. And that voyage of discovery then leads to things that are connected to whatever your passion is. And passion is also at the core of curiosity. And passion should be at the core of what you do in your life. So Joseph Campbell once said that if you follow your bliss, then you're going to find the thing that you're supposed to be doing in life. And so if you don't feel passionate about something, you shouldn't be doing it. So just stop right now, go find another thing, and just keep going until you find something that you really love. I love this land. So how in the world did I learn about forestry? How did I learn about water quality? I've learned about hydrology. I'm a big generalist, but it's because everything is rooted in this place that means everything to me. So those animal trails that come off of this place they go through everything. We go everything from fiber telephony here down to soil analysis and why the heck are my cucumbers putting out so much fruit right now, and how in the world can I get rid of all these things? So these are the sorts of things that every day there are 1,000 new questions. So I would say from an academic standpoint, the academy can teach you so much. You can learn theory, but theory is just theory. It's not practice. It's kind of like a war. You can have a battle plan, and then the bullets start to fly, and you're like, oh crap, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. And so right now, I'm in a battlefield right now, because 6 months ago, my tourism business was expanding. We were codifying some things. We were growing, and suddenly my mother dies, COVID happens, we have tornadoes, and I'm kind of like, okay, I'm not even sure what's going to happen in the next couple of months or in the next couple of years. But that's the thing, is life is uncertain and it's constantly changing. So you can't just lock yourself into one academic discipline. Definitely don't lock yourself into theory, because theories change, and get as much practical experience as you can. Any work is good work. So if you get a job as the chief cook and bottle washer in a restaurant, you're going to learn something and learn from other people. Never think because you have an education that you know more than other people. Some of the greatest mentors I've had are people who had a 3rd or 4th grade education and could work magic with wood or with cloth, or they could knit nets. I can't catch a fish that you'd want to eat, and I have 2 master's degrees and most of a PhD, and that doesn't help me catch fish. So just be open,
Right.
and learn as much as you can, and also you just don't know when the next inspiration is going to come, but you got to be open to it. And then, you know, and taking courses like the ones that you have at UGA, you're going to get exposure to things. And because I go back and forth between the academy and theory and practicality constantly. So you constantly have to have a dialogue within your own head about what you're doing and how you can apply theory. You know, this morning I was talking about vertical integration with my husband, and then we're applying that to a subset of people who have no idea what in the heck we're talking about. We understand it, we're talking about it theoretically, but they don't need to know the theory, that you just need to know how to translate it so that you can put it into action.
Can you speak to particular land management practices that you all incorporate, say, or maybe it was 8 months ago versus today, or take us through some of the...
So again, at the core of what we do is forestry, but we also are sustainable forestry. My mother, when she inherited the property in 1969, was told that she needed to cut down all the live oak trees because they carry fusiform rust, and that kills pine trees, and gosh darn it, and they take up all that space. And then she's like, nah, I don't think so. And there are actually still some people in the forestry community in Georgia who think that she ruined her land. However, if a bride stands under one of these 300-year-old oak trees and pays me $5,000 for 15 minutes, and it may or may not work out for her in the end, it's renewable. She can come back again the next time around, right?
Amen.
Right. So, but so we try to do no harm. I mean, I think that's it, and that you don't poop where you eat. That's why we don't strip mine the marsh. It's why we don't cut down our oak trees, and we work with the landscape. And it's just like any good gardener is going to learn that you don't try to plant something where it doesn't want to grow. Try to grow things where they want to grow. And so it's listening to the land. So that's generally what we do. For forestry, we are a group certified forest for sustainability, and we have a professional forest consultant, F&W Forestry, They've been our forester for about 45 years, and we work with them on our land management and our forest plans. And then we also have recently placed working forest conservation easements on about 90% of the property. But we co-wrote those easements so that we could continue to do forestry and agriculture in a sustainable way. So we leave huge buffers on the marsh because the marsh is more critical than the forest. We leave maritime forest where we can. And then we also try to reduce our footprint as much as possible. We're trying to use things on the property. And as we get more and more into renewable energy, trying to use that more and more. So land management is also the aesthetic, because I know that a pumpkin patch is really pretty, but it's an environmental wasteland. And there are a lot of people who come here who do not understand that they're standing in the middle of a tree farm and they're like, oh, I hate tree farm. And it's like, well, you're standing in one. Well, no, this is an old growth forest. It's like, no, this was actually a cotton field, and in between it was an airfield, but now it's a 50-year-old pine stand. And that's part of the education too. So the management and the education go hand in glove, and because people aren't trained foresters and they don't really understand forestry, we try very hard to get to share what we know about that management with the people who come here, and in doing that, people walk away with some knowledge, and that may be the best souvenir that they have. And you may want to turn around at this point and take a look at this house that is behind you. When I live on a plantation, and guess what? This right here is a plantation house, shining light and everything. And we have a guest who's enjoying it right now.
There's Scott.
There's Scott. But this is a traditional plantation home that you would have found here in coastal Georgia, built in 1840. People go, but where's the plantation house? Well, that's it. And then we teach them about it, and they walk away and they're like, hey, I've got like this cool privilege of knowing that this is a plantation house in coastal Georgia.
Yeah.
And they never forget it. And you've just changed their paradigm a little bit, and you've made them curious.
Well, a lot of students may think that they can't do this. They don't have the history that you have been afforded to move forward with a career or something that you're passionate about. How do they take this education from Warnell? And I know you've talked about passion and curiosity and following that trail, but to give them a greater sense of the hard work that it takes to be successful in whatever you do. What advice do you have? Anything that's different from what you've already said? Maybe I'm not clear.
So no. I think a lot of people sometimes, and it's interesting that you pointed out, I was born to this, right?
That's right. We're all born to something.
But that's right. I will tell you that there were years where I would go for 180 days without a day off.
Yeah, but would you do this if you didn't have this? Would you be doing this?
If I felt passionate about sharing the information and sharing the coast, because I see this a lot. It's I am blessed because I have a place where I am rooted, I'm anchored.
That's right.
I see people who come here and they're like, God, this is amazing. How can I do this? Because there are options. And for instance, somebody could come and work for me and be mentored. And understanding that it is hard work. You may put in an 18 or a 20-hour day. It can be punishing at times. And you're not born knowing. You're going to make mistakes. but if you can find a niche where you can learn. So I just want to touch back on something when you asked me about, like, I don't have any formal training in tourism. Where I learned everything I know about tourism was from back then it was called the Colonial Coast Travel Association. It was the coastal tourism region that was sponsored by the State Economic Development Authority. And there's a region for each part of Georgia, and there were people in their 50s and 60s who had been doing tourism forever. And when I was a baby at 22, they're like, here, let's take you under our wing, and you're going to have to work hard, but if you stay on this committee, we're going to teach you everything you need to know about international destination tourism or group tours or whatever.
Yeah.
And I kept my ears open, and I was willing to shoulder in and do what they asked me to do. I learned how to lobby. I learned how to do all these things because I just volunteered. So
Right.
some of it, you can have a job that then introduces you to volunteer opportunities. And that's where you learn the most, is when you're like, hey, I just want the knowledge. I don't need to be paid for this. I'm making the bills because I'm the chief cook and bottle washer over here, or I'm leading some kayak trips, or I'm doing the nature walks. And there are places that do that. But leaving yourself open for other learning opportunities, that gives you, then you learn, and then you can build. And
Gail, it's funny you say volunteer. Gail talked about volunteering in with professional organizations and those groups that have that similar interest that you're interested in, and learn from that and take away what you want and need. But it also allows you to identify things you maybe are not interested in or don't want to do.
oh, that's a good point.
Have you found that to be true in your own experience, where it's like, okay, I've done it, but I know I don't want to do that now?
Oh, absolutely.
I worked hard as a young man, and I had to dig a ditch one summer. I was digging ditches. I knew I didn't want to do that anymore. But, so do you have any experiences like that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, for the naturally curious person, it is very hard to say no to things. And there is only so much time. There's only, and I'm guilty of. It's like,
You want to do everything.
it's like I'm a cat. I'm like, ooh, there's something over there. And I'll chase after that. But yes, you learn what you don't like, and that helps you. It's your life is sort of like a decision tree. So you're
Yeah.
constantly applying. It's like, yeah, this doesn't bring me joy, and so I'm working at 50 or nearly 50. I'm still working on what is it that I'm passionate about. What are my core beliefs, and what do I want to do with this life? We get one, and so revisiting what those core values are, testing them every now and then as you reach and you say, well, that was an interesting experience, but I don't need to do that. That is really great for kind of saying, well, I don't need to go down that animal trail. I can stay on this path. And I know exactly what she's talking about. I was very active with the Georgia Forestry Association for a long time. I was on their public affairs committee. I did a lot of lobbying. And I also was on their education committee. So I was involved with Tree Farm, and I was involved with PLT, Project Learning Tree. And I don't like industry. I don't like working with industry. I mean, they're great as partners, but it's like, I can't be an industry person, because I can't be in that bureaucracy. I know I gotta have my own path, that I can be my own boss. And you don't get to start off being your own boss, but you earn your way there, and hopefully you can carve out a niche for yourself where you can do that. But it's hard for me to do that. So that's something I know I don't want to do.
Yeah. And I like your point about finding a mentor, and cognitive apprenticeship theory and basic practices, learning from others who know. And besides your mother and those other people around your life, has there been a mentor to you that you have found the greatest benefits, or outside of your family, and someone that's local?
I have learned one of the benefits to growing up in the country in the 1970s was that there were still older people. there were not a lot of kids here. This is an older place. A lot of people had moved away. So largely people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s. I got involved with oral history very early because I was fascinated by hearing about other people's experiences and learning about what they did and how they lived with the land. So I had a lot of people who were just in and out of my life, who were kind of like surrogate grandparents in a way. So they taught me a lot about land, and about how to live with it, not on it or off it. And then working with our forester, Wade McDonald, who came here, was extremely very open-minded and didn't mind a woman being involved in business or forestry, which was a little unusual for a while. And he was a good mentor. But everybody is a potential mentor.
Yeah.
Because everybody has a different experience than we do. Right now, my husband is a bit of a mentor. He's a coach, and he fills some gaps that I know I have in my understanding of things, and that's how we forge something new together, and improve on what we've done before. So, yeah, I guess everybody could be a mentor. There's nobody in particular, but yeah.
You talked about the future and forward-looking. What, in addition to those sorts of ideals that you have, what would you find is the most rewarding aspect of what you do? You can encapsulate.
Oh my
everything
gosh,
that's here.
just sitting here on the bluff right now with you. This is beautiful. It's, my joke used to be that, I'm the chief cook and bottle washer. It's like summer camp every day here, but I always have KP duty. I always have latrine duty. But I get to live here. And I didn't, wasn't paid, but I got to live here. And because this is, again, the root of my passion, I got to be here. But one of the best things, I think, is meeting people. And the people who have been possibly the most helpful to us are people, and friends even, who started off as paying guests, who we had discovered affinities. There are people who have stepped up to help us in extremely dark moments in the last 25 years, where forces outside of ourselves tried to do other than what was right with the property, and people who stepped up and said, I don't care if I lose my job over this place is too valuable. How did that happen? I don't know, but that's what's remarkable to me. And again, it just comes back to this one spot. I'm just the latest steward in thousands of years of people who have lived here and have lived with it. And just to know that I'm part of that is also very powerful. And that I hope that students who are casting around trying to figure out where they fit and where people are seeking some meaning in what they do in their lives, that you find something like this. And hopefully we'll be hiring. I don't know.
Yeah. We know that we have students who have internships at state parks, nature centers. One recent graduate is now in California at a camp. Given the fact that, so if there wasn't the situation we're in with the COVID virus, what would you imagine going on around here right now, and what would students kind of anticipate doing as a job if they were hired by you right now to be working? It's almost
They'd
like
be cleaning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe mowing, or they would be taking out trash, but
yeah, it just depends on what segment of the business, because of course we have many facets, and it also probably be sort of cross-trained into different areas of the business. So you might be leading a kayak trip You would be learning about salt marsh ecology, learning the birds here. When somebody comes up to you and says, "What was that bird I heard?" And you're like, "Don't know." Turns into, "Oh, that was a pileated woodpecker." Definitely housekeeping. That seems to be an entry level thing, and hospitality. Obviously, we have to do housekeeping.
Right.
But we also have enough diversity here that it's not 24 hours a day to housekeeping. That you get a chance to learn things. You get to meet people, and we've actually expanded here during the pandemic. We had started in doing a little bit of agriculture, so we've constructed a greenhouse. We're exploring different small crops that we can grow, and so there's some of that as well. And it could just be a little bit of everything. So whatever could happen with land management, whether it's we're storing lumber, or we're cleaning a bathroom, or we're hosting a luncheon, or giving a garden tour, going out and spraying for the deer, attacking caterpillars,
Right.
Yeah, all those things.
I understand.
I have a question, unless you have one. So I hear running a common thread through a lot of the things you're saying is a land ethic. And so I saw you had Elder Leopold.
Yes.
So I've been.
I'm sorry, who is that?
Yeah, just tell
By the
us
way,
how-
that's one of the books students you must read is Sand County Almanac.
There's a really nice illustrated one that you can look at the pictures and don't tell them that. No.
It's a
such a
wonderful-
great book.
We actually found it because it's off the beaten path. The foundation, the family has it, but they'll let folks know where it is if you want to go and see it. It's, of course, up near Madison, Wisconsin, so we were able to see it. But I just wonder how that has inspired you here, because it sounds like you have an immense connection to the land. So I just wondered how that inspired you, or maybe you had this inspiration before and then you read Leopold and you're like, he got it back in the 40s, he got it.
Yeah.
But I just wondered.
So Leopold, so I did not read Aldo Leopold until I was probably in my 30s. And it's kind of like when you meet somebody and you realize, like, I feel like I've known you my whole life. That's how Sand County Almanac feels. That is sort of like, or you could read the Teal's book on Sapelo, or you can, even somebody like a Pat Conroy who writes fiction, but it's this landscape, and it's like, oh man, you just said it, didn't you? But the land ethic, I mean, that it was sort of like, oh, that, now you've given it a name, and I didn't have a name for it before. And I think that's one of the most valuable things about school, is that when you read in classes, you're introduced to things like Sand County Almanac, or some of the other great writers, like John Muir. I love reading John Muir. He's interesting because he's just sort of like a vagabond in a lot lot of ways, and he's
But
having.
it's like reading Dickens. You got to get through a lot of the grandiose words. It's great. It's wonderful.
Although, locally, the autobiography of Joseph LeConte is actually quite fascinating. The LeConte brothers went on to found the University of California, and they were founders of the Sierra Club along with Muir. But they grew up, 15 miles from here, and their land ethic, why they got interested in geology and everything, is that how could you not when you live in it?
Yeah.
So actually the most critical thing is that the only thing constant is change, right? So nothing is fixed. It's like, the tree farm. It's like, well, I hate tree farm, and then this is an old growth forest, and it's like, no, it's not. Nah. This tree is old, but it's going to fall in someday. And
2001 Mother's Day story.
yeah, so right, and I recently found this piece that I'd written back in 2001, almost 20 years ago, and about this piece of property. This was directly across the highway, and And that it was the lesson I learned when we cut it the first time. That to me, as a small child, it was like this fairyland. It was like so distant. It was like all the way over there, and there were ravines, and it was just this thing. And then my mother's like, well, we're going to be selling the trees, and it's going to change. And I'm like, but what about, and she said, well, you remember how I told you that everything here was in fields when I was a kid in the 1930s, and you could see forever. And these trees are new. And she said, in your lifetime, it's going to change, and you'll find other things to love. But the land itself is what you love. Because, you know, we've had 3 tornadoes in the last 3 months, and it's kind of like, well, poof, that's not there anymore. And we can't mourn its passage more than we accept that it's changing. And how do we plan for the next thing? And Scott, you're absolutely right about, like, oak trees in and of themselves. We think they're beautiful, but they were the first things that people cut down to build ships, and they were like gold or oil. They were so valuable, and now we value them for something else. And so we have to look ahead and plan. So when we're managing land, why did Laura not cut down the oak trees? Well, because she liked them, but they're also great habitat. Oh, and we can have a wedding under them. And who knows in 50 years what an oak tree is going to be worth under some other context. We know that this one will not live forever, because nothing does. But you're right, we may plant that next row. And we're constantly thinking ahead and wargaming and coming up with different scenarios, because it will change. Yes.
That may change, but your land philosophy that you have, your own internal philosophy about the land, that's what I should have said, it'll continue to grow and deepen. And I really am glad that you mentioned some of the authors, that Leopold in particular. Are there other things that you would like to impart to the students that, you know, are important about developing your own philosophy, be it land management or career or natural resources in general? What's the importance to you? Do you feel more grounded or less grounded?
More. Yeah, so I feel more grounded, and it's familiarity. Okay, so like, just imagine we're speed dating, right? And I get like 2 minutes with somebody. You don't know a thing about that person. Well, they've got a great smile, or I didn't like the fact that he picked his nose. I mean, yeah. And it can happen, man, you know? But I know there was a moment, probably 5 years after I moved home. This was like 98 or so. And I remember looking out the window and thinking, I know exactly within a couple of days what day of the year it is, what the phase of the moon is, what the phase of the tide is, because my body and my mind and everything had attuned itself back to nature. And I wasn't on a clock. Clock time is out there, and we have to adhere to it, but it was being here and living with it. And I can tell by the color of the marsh what time of the year it is. I can tell by the sounds I'm hearing what birds are here, and that tells me more. And so that familiarity, it's just as you get to know somebody over time. And the longer you know somebody, you know, it can breed contempt, sure, but you can also, but usually that love deepens and it changes. And so my ethic, the love is there, but as the land changes, the land is telling me what it was going to do. And that's, if you can spend time with something, it's like you go, again, this dating analogy is really quite good. It's like you go on a bunch of dates with different people, and then you click with somebody and you go on like 4 or 5 dates, or maybe you date for 6 months, and then you date for 2 years, and then you break up because it wasn't. But you just got to keep trying to connect with something that's passionate within you, see it out, and then see where it goes, and then you will And then there is a bit of you blossom where you're planted. So it was very hard for me at one point to say I made a choice to be here because there were other places I could be. Yeah, I could go to Switzerland. It's very nice there and cool. But then eventually I always yearned to come back. And there were opportunities to go and do other things. That's the thing about life. You have so many choices, and the younger you are, the more is open to you. But you've got to go down a path, and then sometimes you say, well, that choice was mistaken, but choosing a direction was not mistaken. And as you choose, you're going to discover what you're passionate about, and then you will begin to understand people and the place and whatever you're doing even better. And there is something very gratifying about knowing something so well that I can close my eyes and I know it's low tide because I smell that sulfur.
Mm-hmm.